Welcome to the Theater of Others podcast. My name is Adam Marple, and I'm the co-artistic director of the Theater of Others. With the COVID-19 pandemic forcing a shutdown and reevaluation of space and gathering, we at the Theater of Others are thinking about what stories we need and how best we can share them. We believe space is psychology, and it informs the way in which an audience interacts and reacts to what is presented to them. We create uniquely theatrical events in bespoke sensory performance spaces crafted to encourage curiosity and grant the audience permission to commune with the play. Now that that space has moved online, how can we encourage interaction and action amongst an audience virtually? The Theater of Others produces plays that both welcome and challenge the audience. We are committed to international collaboration and are a laboratory that helps artists grow through intensive study of their craft. The Theater of Others creates a shared community of artists and audiences for the purpose of exploring the most profound issues of our lives and times. We believe the play watches the audience. The audience is necessary, and they are witness to what happens. And you get to be witness to us making that happen. The purpose of this podcast is to open up our process and let you in. We're peeling back the curtain, so to speak, and encouraging you to follow along, to ponder, prod, and question, to join us and criticize us if need be. Being a witness is no passive task, and it requires much from you. Are you up for the journey? On the podcast today from Melbourne, Australia, our co-artistic directors Woody Miller and myself in Cairo, Egypt. This podcast contains explicit language. Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Theater of Others podcast. It's me again. We still can't seem to get our schedules correctly scheduled with each other. So here I am again, not by myself this time, thankfully. Today, we're starting off our audio new play festival with our interview with our first playwright, Frazer Shepherdson, who has written Firespeak, coming out this next week. Very careful listeners of the podcast will realize that we've had Frazer on before. He was here last year with us with Whale Song. He was also our first playwright in the Audio Play Festival, first up. So he's a good one to kind of test the waters and get everybody ready for the month that's about to come. I don't need to go through any logistics or kibitz or gossip with myself. Let's just bring Frazer right in.
Say
Frazer.
hello. Hey.
Yeah, exactly. Come on in. There's no need. We're just gonna talk for a little while. Welcome back.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us again. Thanks for submitting again.
Thanks for having me back. Yeah, thank you. I knew that I wanted to go again. Yeah. After Whale Song kind of came out and the festival kicked off, I was like, I want to do it again, you know. And I go back and I like, because I went back and I listened to Whale Song sort of semi recently, and I think I was talking to a friend about this the other day, how like I think the curse, and I suppose in some ways the blessing of art and making your own stuff, is that like you go and you experience the stuff, you listen to it or you read the stuff that you created before, and you're always like, I feel like I can do better, you know, or something. It's just like you can't enjoy the good parts of it or the parts that were good, because suddenly you're just like, you're your own worst critic, I suppose. And so there was a bit of that, and it was also that I just had so much fun making it with everyone last year. I was like, I really like this audio play thing. I really like this medium. So I'm so excited to be back on it again.
Well, we're happy to have you back. Like we said this from the beginning. Like, you were the first person to submit. Like, we announced it, and within like, you know, a couple of days, like you sent us. I don't know if you sent us the original idea or not, but I remember all us going like, oh, good, Frazer's back. Like, you know, like because I mean, and this is not just to kind of like, you know, pump you up or anything, but really for the audience to know, like, you were the easiest person to work with in the process last year and this year, I think, just because you took the initiative, you looked for outside funding, you got all your actors together, you found a space, like you were on top of it. And it didn't require a whole lot of us like hand holding. We were there if you needed us, and if you needed, you know, something, your hand held, or you needed us to do something for you, we could absolutely do that. But like, you were just ready to go, and that was so fantastic, and really lovely for us to kind of go, okay, yeah, we trust Frazer. Like we know what he can do, what he's capable of. So thank you for that. I'll say that while we're all very busy and doing things that we didn't have to like babysit, which is great. So
yeah. Oh, thank you.
So when you said you knew you wanted to come back this year and do this, did you already have your idea in mind, or did you like, I want to do this and I'll find an idea as I work on it?
I think it was the latter. Yeah, I think it was the latter. I knew that I wanted to do it, and I just kind of, I'm trying to think now. Actually, did I have the idea? I don't think I did. I think it was the same. It was the same thing as what happened last year, where I saw the prompt, and then the gears sort of started turning a bit. But yeah, I knew that I wanted to do it, and I knew sort of roughly when the prompt for the festival was going to come out, and so. And I suppose that were like, yeah, like kernels of sort of inspiration that were sort of bubbling away, and then the prompt came out, and then I kind of, I feel like I kind of manipulated the idea that I had at the time to fit the prompt, because it was already, it was obviously already there, and then wanted to, to fit it in.
Let's talk about that, because your initial idea and the play that we'll hear next week are different things.
Very different.
Very different things. So can you talk about your original idea, where that came from, what that was, and if it has a life?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we talk about what they're going to hear, let's hear what they're not going to hear. What
you won't hear, what you'll never hear. Alternate universe.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd be hearing in an alternate universe somewhere. Yeah. So the original idea was really different. It was I wanted to write an audio play that was set in my my D&D world, the one that I've been working on for many years. Because I just wanted to write something fantasy. Like, I knew that I wanted to do that. I wanted to, because I just love it so much. Like, I love writing sort of epic fantasy where the stakes are through the roof and everything's so dramatic and intense and crazy. And I also just had this, have this world that I have, written over many years to sort of play in. And I was like, I feel like that'd be a cool setting for an audio play. And now that I'm talking about it, it's kind of coming back. Like, I had this idea in my mind before I saw the prompt, and then the prompt came out, which was I too am an ancestor. And I was like, okay, cool. So how can I make this idea of telling a story in my D&D world? How can I make that fit the prompt? And then I think it kind of became the idea was, okay, well, I'll tell the creation story of my D&D world through this audio play. And then the idea came after that, as I was sort of writing it and talking to Stephen a little bit, the idea came, okay, well, I could draw inspiration from Australian Indigenous creation stories and from the dream time, to sort of like to further sort of embed it in this idea of ancestors and the people that sort of came before. And that ultimately, like that idea, I think, has shaped the play as it is now. But previously it was really different. And I was thinking about this today. I was thinking about like how come it sort of changed so much, because when I was working with Steve, and I was like, there was just something that wasn't quite landing, or something that wasn't quite sort of clicking for me. And I think my theory is that because like my understanding of my personal understanding of fantasy, as is a lot of people, is a very Western understanding, right?
Yeah.
Like very, very Tolkien.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're all used to, like dragons and that. And so the D&D world that I've created, whilst I try to break away from traditional sort of stereotypes into the fantasy genre as much as I can, I can't to a certain point, because there's like,
it's so embedded.
Because yeah, it's so embedded. I'm so sort of predisposed to the idea of, dragons and giants and magic and this and that. And I was trying to sort of, I was trying to take the stories from Australian Indigenous culture, and it felt like kind of like trying to force like a square peg into a circular hole, because it's like, well,
Yeah.
they just don't fit that sort of
Mm-hmm.
that canon.
Mm-hmm.
But they're so beautiful. These stories are so incredible. And a friend of mine who was working on the play with me very kindly pointed out to me that, because I was referring to these stories, these Australian Indigenous stories, I was referring to them as folklore and mythology. And my friend pointed out that that's not the right thing to refer to them as, because it's calling them that is similar to calling like Christianity folklore or mythology, because these stories are real. Like they're the creation stories that are relevant to all of the different language groups around Australia, because there's so many, and they're amazing. They're incredible. Like they're so they're so epic and dramatic, and like they're all about the natural world. And they're all about the way that the world is sort of the way things are in the world, and it's what the Australian Indigenous people believe, like how the world came to be. And they're so valuable, and we just don't sort of see them sort of told enough in Australia, at least, or retold. And I just knew that I wanted to do something with that, and so I did more research and leaned more into the stories themselves. And I was like, okay, well, what kind of story can I tell with, what kind of world can I create through these stories? What kind of characters can I create through these stories? And that's where Firespeak kind of found itself, I think, was when I started sort of appreciating, oh, this is a story about the stories that have been told in our own backyard for thousands and thousands of years, rather than trying to sort of apply them to a Western narrative. So yeah, I think that's more or less sort of how it kind of boiled down to what it is now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about the version that you will write or have already started writing of your fantasy land, but we'll save that for a little bit later. I want to delve into this process a little bit. So,
Sure.
Obviously, as a white Australian guy, digging into indigenous stories and everything else like that, there was, as you said, there was a lot of research needed. Talk about the kind of like, I mean, because we did kind of say, we had a negotiation back and forth, you and me and Booty and Steven, of kind of saying like, yeah, if you're going to go down this road, like if you're really going to go down this road, that's fantastic. It's fantastic. Not a lot of people know these stories outside of Australia, especially even inside Australia, clearly.
Yeah.
So how can you be the voice for that? How can you write these stories? What is it that you're bringing to this, and why you? Can you talk a little bit about your kind of research and writing process, and when you bring Steven on board, or when you involve him in that process?
Totally. So it was, I spent a long time reading through the different stories that inspired the piece itself. And I was very careful to not, when I was writing it, to not make it like a retelling of these stories, because that felt wrong to me, and to not really make it a retelling or an adaptation of these stories. What I was more interested in doing was drawing inspiration from these stories, and then sort of using them to tell what is a unique story. And the initial process was just like a lot of reading and talking to a lot of my friends who are Indigenous, who worked on the piece, about like what are we trying to do? What are we actually trying to do with this sort of story? What are we trying to sort of achieve? And I think the hope that we all sort of came to with it was that like we want to, the ultimate dream is to kind of pioneer a genre of Australian epic fantasy, which is like, you know, because in the same way that you see like Christianity and Nordic and ancient Greek sort of those mythos sort of used in and inspired like in tales of modern fantasy. We all sort of said like it'd be awesome if that was the case with Australian Indigenous sort of these stories as well. Like why can't we sort of bring them into the fold more, bring them into the fantasy canon? And yeah, I think it was just a case of like of really making sure that we were telling a unique story, and that it was all told by Australian Indigenous people, like all the cast are Indigenous, and that was just essential in sort of the bringing the spirit of the piece forward, I think, as well. Yeah, and Stephen did a really good job of, I think, where Stephen was really helpful was sort of shifting it from the original idea into this new kind of this new one that what Firespeak has become, because Stephen sort of helped me see that it was like it feels like two ideas sort of butting up against each other, and it feels like there was sort of some level of cohesion towards the start of the piece, but then in the original idea, some level of cohesion, but then it starts to kind of lose sight of what it actually was. And Stephen just helped kind of develop that a bit more. And I basically just like, I sat there after reading one of the many emails that Stephen and I had back and forth. I was just sat there looking at the script and I was like, I gotta start again. Like I gotta start this thing again. And so I sat there and I started rewriting the script, and went through more iterations with it, but eventually came to what it was. And yeah, the hope is that it will be sort of seen as a celebration of how of looking at what we have in our own backyard, and looking at what sort of is so deeply entrenched in the earth that we are all very fortunate to be on. By rights probably shouldn't be on, but you know, we are. And it's like, what can we what can we do with that? You know, what can we do with these sort of these amazing stories that we have, and how can we make them sort of as epic as what they are? And like and maybe create something new that hasn't sort of been seen before in the traditional Western fantasy canon, you know?
Because it's what 65,000 years of history of living living there, and stories and story time versus there's the 2,500 years of Greek Greek history and whatnot, a couple hundred years of Nordic history. I think it's very ambitious what you're all trying to do with Australian high epic fantasy. That's really cool. That's a really key moment in the process when the initial idea has to be let go. Otherwise it can undermine the project itself, because it is trying to be two different things, right? But all that work or all that thought doesn't go away. It becomes a foundation for something, because I can still see, I mean, knowing you and knowing what your interests are and what my interests are as well, I could still look at this as, like, oh, that's like that D&D, like the frog at the end is just like the giant toad that swallows people. Of course. Yeah. It makes total, like I can make those transitions, and I can easily go, okay, I understand this. There's nothing in hearing this that I'm like it's completely foreign to me.
Totally. It's still a quest, right?
Yeah, it's still a quest. And you even start out by saying like Prometheus, if there's a point of reference for you, or Anansi the spider, if that's a point of reference for you. Like these are all stories that go beyond culture and time and place.
Mm.
But here's a story that you definitely do not know.
Yeah.
Folks out there outside of Australia who are not, well versed in Indigenous culture, like you definitely have never heard the story that's going on. It's really quite interesting to hear that. So were your actors / friends involved in the process from the very beginning? Like you knew who was going to be doing this, or are there people that you were definitely leaning on saying like, yeah, I think I need their voice?
There were people who I was definitely leaning on to begin with. And I knew that, particularly when I got to the second iteration of the piece, I was like, well, it's there's no question everyone in this piece has to be Indigenous, because these are where the stories are coming from. And so they're all people that I know. Like they're either very close friends of mine, or people who are friends of mine through the people that I know. And it was really awesome. Ella, who voices the mother and the seventh sister, she was kind enough to put me in touch with her dad, Paul, and he voices the storyteller, and it's the first voice acting that he's ever done, or any sort of acting that he's ever done, and he just is perfect for it. Like, he just has the most perfect storytelling voice. And I remember, actually, the reason I wanted him in it was because when I first met him, he told me, we were sitting at the dining room table at his place, and he was telling me about how when he was a young man in the Navy, and he just the way that he sort of told this story, and he just had my full attention, and I couldn't, it just was so. It was so awesome to just sit there and listen to him talk and listen to him yarn, and it was like I want that voice, I want to hear your voice in this sort of in this medium. So yeah, and they're all Zach and Corey have worked with me in Ilbidri, which is a brilliant theatre company, Indigenous Australian theatre company, based in Melbourne. And Tiala is a very, very talented actor who's doing some really awesome stuff at the moment. And she was in the year below us at VCA. So yeah, it's really one thing that I've really enjoyed sort of figuring out after coming out of drama school, or enjoyed learning, is that the community of people you come out of drama school with is ultimately the best thing that you get out of going to drama school. Yeah.
You're paying all that money just to make friends, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Lifelong collaborators is what you're going to be making. Yeah.
Totally. Which is, I mean, you can't really put a price on that. It's awesome. Because otherwise I'm just I don't know where I would even start. I don't know where I would begin if I didn't know all of these brilliantly talented people. I'd have to make a post on Star Now or something, and that'd just be nightmarish. I think one of the reasons I'm able to be organized making these works is because I already know the people who are kind of I know who I'm going to work with. Yeah.
So you've done the research, you've gotten the people involved, you've done the writing. You've gotten your emails back and forth with Stephen. The dramaturgy is taken care of. What's the step where you go, okay, I'm ready to rehearse with the actors or step into a recording studio? What's that moment like? Because you're also directing it as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's you say that I'm organized, and I suppose I am to a point, but it was a frantic. We're talking about scheduling before we started this episode today, and how difficult it can be, and oh my god, it's nightmarish. There's something, I don't know if it's something about this year in particular, or if this is just real life, but no one's schedules line up for anything. This whole year, I just haven't been able to sort of find a time to get everyone together, and I was so lucky. I think I did when I knew who the actors were, I made a when is good thing, how people can put in their available times. And it was It was horrible. Like everyone said, "Oh yeah, I've done it," and then I opened it up and I was like, "Okay, so there's like half an hour on like a Wednesday night when everyone is available, and that's it."
Yeah.
So it was a miracle that we managed to get everyone into the studio when we did, and even then, we actually didn't manage to get everyone in the studio. We had to do some recording with Ella, just in my bedroom, with a microphone, but it was so like same thing as same thing with Whale Song last year when we did that. And the reason that I wanted to come back is that it's just wicked fun being in the studio and recording all together and just having fun. Because there's something quite private about recording an audio play, which is really nice because you're not in front of an audience or anything. And I always work with my friends on creative projects. So it's just a bunch of pals sitting around in a studio, just sort of laughing and saying the lines and then pausing and then going back and saying them again in a slightly different way. And the whole process is really awesome. Just I really enjoy doing that, and I really enjoy directing because it requires so much visualization from the team, and sort of imaginative work, which all of the people that I worked with on this are incredibly capable of. And so it was just awesome to sort of sit in this room, this smelly, hot recording studio, and sort of using the script to sort of take us out of it and take us sort of somewhere else, which is ultimately what we're trying to do for listeners as well. It's like as much as we do that sort of imaginative transport. I don't know if that's a word. Yeah. Transportative work. We do that as much as actors as we do it for the audience as well. Yeah. with audio plays. It's so I feel very comfortable in a studio. I've come to feel very comfortable in a recording studio, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. Boy, buddy, you want to talk about scheduling problems? Try running an international theater company with members on several different continents.
I'd rather not.
Booty and I are literally in the same continent in the same time zone, and we still can't get our shit together. So, I feel you. I feel you when people are literally just down the road, and it's got to be even more frustrating because it's like, what?
Yeah.
How?
It's like, surely we can just walk up the road. But no.
Really? Tuesday at 4 a.m. is the only time we have available?
It's the only time.
Okay.
All right. We can do Tuesday at 4.
Tuesday at 4 it is. Great. Yeah. So you're currently in the process, or I'll say Jack is currently in the process of mixing and mastering and fixing and creating all the design. So what's that part like? I mean, you've written the thing, you've researched the thing, you're in the studio with the actors, you're directing the actors, and then you kind of hand it off and then don't see or don't hear for a while. Like, what's the communication between you and Jack like of like what you're looking for? Or do you just kind of say like, Jack, I trust you, go with it? Like, what's that communication like?
I really trust Jack. Like, I trust Jack a lot, I think, because he's so good at what he does that I'm so happy to just sort of like give him the thing and be like, all right, have fun. Let me know if you need anything. Right. I know you'll create something brilliant. But it is a long period of time where it's just sort of like, it's just quiet, It's like you finish it all up and then my job kind of ends a little bit. Like I do some of the marketing stuff, which I'm still learning how to do. But yeah, it's just like it all sort of, it's so crazy, and it's all like you're writing the thing, like what you said, you're writing the thing for ages and ages, and getting bogged down with two ideas coming up against each other, and thinking you're a horrible artist, and then finding something that actually works, and you're like, oh, this is awesome. I have like a script, and then you get your actors, and then you find that you can record at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday finally, and then And then you do it, and then it's all quiet and nothing, and it just goes silent for so long. But then you get to hear that blessed first draft or concept piece, and it's like, there it is, there it is. That's the story that I had sort of knocking around in my head for ages. Because even in the studio, it's all sort of broken up, and you don't get, you do to a point, I suppose, but you don't get the whole sort of unbroken narrative of the piece.
Yeah.
And then when you hear it all together, it's like, yeah, it makes, yes, that's what it is.
Oh, I'm not an idiot. I'm not a fool. It's not just an imagined thing in my, okay, this is pretty good. This is pretty damn good.
Yeah. It's not just me sitting in my room talking to myself and so it's a funny time. It's like a nice sort of time as well, that sort of that void between finishing recording and hearing the first draft, because it's like you can just, I find that I can just let it go. Mm-hmm. And this year's just been so ridiculously crazy that like I've been lucky enough to have other things to keep me distracted, even if I don't really want them. But yeah, it's a nice time to sort of like reset and just sort of sit for a bit, and then you get the first draft, and then the job sort of starts again, where you so talk about edits and things to sort of tweak and change a bit, and then you get the full thing. And then the job kind of stops there when it's actually out and released in the world, and it's like, okay, well, what's next?
Well, yeah. So what is next? So tell us about does the original idea have a further life? I mean, you have this amazingly rich fantasy land, and you have your own podcast where people can kind of hear that world. But like, is there a life for the original idea that is bouncing around in there?
Yeah, I think so. I just think it's. I just think it's for somewhere else. I think it's like. I want to do something like I'm listening to a podcast at the moment called Midst, which listeners should definitely check out. It's fantastic.
Really,
yeah. Have you've heard it?
I've listened to season 1. I haven't started on season 2 yet.
Yeah. It's really cool. It's a really cool sort of alternative way of telling a story that I think is. It's different, but it feels familiar as like a player of role-playing games and tabletop role-playing, where you basically, like, the premise of it is you have 3 people who are the narrators telling this story together, and it's sort of semi-improvised, so they like disagree with each other at points, and they voice all the characters, and they kind of design the world. I think it's really, really cool, and I think there's something in that, and it's that has sort of gotten the gears turning for me a bit. And I think if I was going to take the original idea, I'd want to maybe do something to put it into that format, more of like a role-playing format, because that's what the world is designed for. So it would probably feel more natural to tell the creation story of my fantasy world through like this sort of semi-improvised narrative kind of way of telling a story. But we'll see how that goes.
I was, as a kid, I don't want to say I was obsessed, but we'll use this word just because it's the best one I have right now. I was obsessed with choose your own adventure novels. Do you remember those?
Oh yeah, I love
those. And I feel like there's some corollary between role-playing games and just gaming in general with those kind of things. And I always wanted to create theater where there was a sense of a little bit of choose your own adventureness to it, where you could literally, like, if you want to go into the cave, skip to minute 25. If you wanted to turn back and do whatever, skip to just keep listening or whatever. There's something interactive and not just passive that can be done with this medium and with topics like that. Like I definitely think there's, and I think Midst doesn't quite. It's not quite interactive, but I think the fact that because the narrators don't always agree with themselves, and you can't, and they even say, like, sometimes we lie to you. Like there's a sense of like having to kind of like be listening and really checking in and actively engaged in it. I think that's
totally.
Yeah. So that's Yeah, I
Totally.
ship that. I go for that. I'd listen to that that podcast or that show or that version.
Awesome. I'll get onto it then.
Okay, right. Just get onto it.
Yeah.
Because you've not been busy this year at all. You haven't been doing other things or
I've
have
got
other
all the
things that
time
are
in
going
the
on in your
world.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There is something about a thing being improvised or semi-improvised that makes it feel a bit more sort of interactive, I suppose. Something about that. Yeah. Because that's like the premise of role-playing games, isn't it? It's like it's you're gathering around to tell a story. And there's something about hearing three people sort of sit in a room together and tell a story together that feels very like there's a different level of investment, I think, that you have, and a different level of excitement because it's like, we're discovering this together. I think that's what it is. Yeah. It's like as a listener, you're discovering it with the narrators, as well, and that's really cool. I think there's some really interesting potential there for theatre. Yeah.
So I mentioned this before. You have a podcast. Can you tell? I mean, we asked about this before last year, but can you tell us about the podcast more? Can you tell us about what has happened in the last year since we talked to you, and how the campaign is going? I guess.
Sure, totally. I think the podcast has been on hiatus for a little bit due to scheduling.
Yeah. Hey, I'm right there. I haven't played since July. I've got 2 games and I can't get the people.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Even if you play D&D as like a business, in inverted commas, is like what we did with the podcast. We're like, okay, so the only way that we're going to be able to get together regularly and play D&D is if we make this a professional venture. Yeah. Still doesn't happen all the time.
Still doesn't work.
It still doesn't work. You still can't do it. Yeah. So the podcast, it's been on hiatus for a little bit, but we have every intention of getting it back on the rails soon, ASAP, because everyone has just been flat out this year, it seems. But it always happens because we've had to go on hiatus a couple times for different reasons. There was the pandemic, and then there's funding stuff as well that happens as well. But it happens every time. The hiatus happens just at the point where we start to really find this rhythm with each other, and the adventure really starts to sort of pick up momentum. And then you have to take a break, and it's like you come back to it and you're like, okay, well, how do we sort of get that back again? But I think to talk to your question about how it's been going over the last sort of year since we spoke last, I think it's certainly matured a lot. Like it feels like a lot more of a sort of like a mature idea. It feels like it's found its identity a little bit more, which has been really, really cool. And I don't see like I'm really interested to see how the show evolves over time, because I really don't. The more that we do it, I don't, and I don't think the rest of the team does either. I don't see it just sort of being constrained to 5th edition D&D. Because like the more that I listen to shows like Midst, the more I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I think there's like I'm more interested, and all of us on that podcast are more interested in like the narrative potential that comes out of role-playing games as opposed to the game itself,
as opposed to the rules. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, as opposed to the rules. So I'm really excited about the like next year for the podcast, really, because I think we've got some really cool ideas, and about sort of how we want to change it and shape it and sort of transform it into something that ultimately isn't just another D&D podcast, but is more of like and like an epic sort of narrative experience that spans over however many years. So yes, there's a lot more to come, and there's a lot of exciting things to come with the podcast. As soon as we get the time,
as soon as we get the time, of course.
Yeah,
because the biggest, baddest, evil guy is always schedule.
Oh
it's the one that
yes,
always kills us.
yeah.
So, can you talk briefly about? I mean, you're talking about writing a play where you know somewhat what the end of the play is going to be. You know it's going to be self-contained, but you're also talking about writing, and I use this in quotations, writing your campaign, which, do you have an end game in mind, or is it open-ended and it's changing as you go? Like, how do you write that when it was weekly? How do you write that? How do you maintain that, but also leave it loose to let your actors, your characters, take it where they want to? How do you? I mean, you're not thinking of yourself as a playwright, I imagine, in that kind of thing, but in a way, you do kind of are using the same skills, similar skills, right?
Yeah, you really are. I mean, there's so much. Like, I'll die on this hill if it's a hill to be dying on. That D&D and be it acting or writing, they just go hand in hand.
Absolutely,
like they're just perfect for each other.
Yeah.
When I first started DMing, I was very much the playwright, I suppose, where I was like, I had a really specific idea of how I wanted the adventure to go, and how I wanted things to pan out, and how I wanted the players to sort of, what decisions I wanted the players to make. And so I would write a lot. Like, I would write the adventure like down to the, like, every sentence would be like, okay, so you're going to meet this character, and then this character is going to say this, and then they're going to send you on this quest, and you're going to go on this quest, and then you'll succeed at this quest or you won't, and that'll lead to this, and yada, yada, yada. And the more that I've played D&D, and the more that I play it with actors and theatre makers as well, the more that I've learned is that, like, you actually don't have to do a whole lot of work, really, as a DM. Like, you can do what I've done, and I'm sure you've done, and every DM has done, which is like, you know, sit and create this epic world and this epic adventure, and do it for hours and hours and hours and hours. But you'll learn very quickly that can only really be for your personal enjoyment, because the players, you're gonna like spend, I don't know, you could spend like 3 hours mapping out a mountain, a really specific mountain, and the players will go, I want to go check out the forest. Yeah.
or they'll get stuck at a door.
I want to see what's behind this door.
Or they want to follow an NPC and adopt them, and then all of a sudden you got to be like, oh, okay, the baker's name is Timothy, and he needs help getting groceries. Like, are we doing this?
Exactly.
There's a dragon.
Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Exactly. But then the story of Timothy the baker becomes the best thing. Becomes the best story that you've ever DM'd.
Timothy is the way to go.
It's always the way to go. You always follow what the group is sort of wanting to do, and as soon as you can sort of, as a DM, kind of let go of your grand master plan, the more fun you have with it, and the more sort of, like, because then the story becomes surprising for you as well. It's like then you're properly sort of working and you're properly collaborating with the players and telling like an improvised story, and that's where the magic, I think, really of D&D really is. And we've tried a couple of different role-playing systems, but I've noticed that there's a bit of a trend towards systems that encourage very little preparation from game masters. So we've tried one called, which I'd recommend anyone who's interested in role-playing games would try. We've tried a game called Dread, which I think I've spoken to you about, is the one with the Jenga Tower.
Yeah.
It's a horror game. One called Dread and one called Spire, and both of those games are so that, like, in the rule book they say, do not prepare. Do not prepare as little as you can. Maybe have like 3 or 4 characters that you think might be important. Have like 3 or 4 ideas of scenes and how like things that might happen, but leave the rest to chance, because that's like the true spirit of the game.
Nice.
and I don't quite have it synthesized in my mind, but I know that there is a lesson in writing theater to be taken from that.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
I don't quite know what it is exactly, but it's like letting the story be a surprise to you as a writer, I think, is really interesting. And also, there's something to be said as well for, like, Stephen King talks about it in his writing book, where he's like, kill your darlings, which is like, if you have an idea that you really love, but it's just not working, then you just got to get rid of it.
Gotta go, yeah.
And you
I mean,
got to
there's a
trust
lesson.
that, like,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
got to.
there's a
I was just going to say,
lesson
you got to
for
trust
directors.
that idea. Oh,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. I mean, that's you got to. It's a lesson for directors as well. I mean, I've said this before: kill your darlings all the time. But it's also a thing you mentioned, which is all that preparation that you do before you come into the rehearsal room as a director gets left on that table behind you as you step forward into the rehearsal space with the actors and go, great, what are we doing today?
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I have my plan there. You know, I can always railroad, you know, the story if I need to, if things are getting out of hand, but I can always go back to that. But just being present with them and going, okay, what are you bringing today? Because I mean, it's a thing where I liken as a director, talking specifically here, is like my art is the art of all of us. So I need color to paint. And if I tell you that you're going to paint red and you don't feel like painting red today, then I'm going to get some really crappy red. But if I come to you and I go, great, where are you at today? What's going on? What are we doing? And then I can go, ooh, more of this, less of that. You go sit down. You come over here. Great. What's going on? What are you feeling? You know, and that's why I've really enjoyed D&D, and I see that as a director. I'm not a playwright myself. I have written plays. I would never call myself a playwright. But yeah, I can see that from a director's point of view. I can see that from a playwright's point of view as well.
Yeah. The beauty of the collaboration. Well, we were lucky enough to, earlier this year, we were lucky enough to actually work together and be in the same space together. And it was yourself, Ella, and Mila, who were both on Firespeak, who worked on it with me. And I can't remember the specifics of the conversation, but we just worked with you. We went to Bali with Theatre of Others, and we just worked with you. You would just run a session with us on viewpoints. And Ella and I were talking. We were talking about. We came out of it and we said, "Oh, Adam's such a DM. Like, he's such a DM." In the way that you sort of delivered the workshop, and the way that you like would present your ideas and sort of engage with people. It's so D&D. Like, it's so like he's such a nerd, and I just feel it's so. I feel like such a.
I'll take it.
Right? It is. It is such a compliment. It is such a compliment, because it takes a lot of takes a lot of sort of wisdom, I think, to be able to have have all these ideas, but then to trust that they will be changed and ultimately made better by other people when you work with them. You know.
Yeah. Well, you've reached the seal now, so tell everybody about Bali. What was your experience like? I mean, you don't have to be an advertisement for us, but we will be doing this again next year. So, like, what were you expecting? What did you experience? What were highs? What were lows? I'd love to hear, because like we never got to talk about what you went through there.
Totally. It all happened so fast. Well, I'll be very frank. When Buddy asked, like before, I think it was in maybe February or so, earlier this year, when Buddy asked to meet up with Ella and I, because he wanted to talk to us about Bali and about us coming to Bali. I was immediately like, no, I'm not going to fall for it. I'm not going to fall for it. I know that this is some sort of like.
It's a pyramid scheme, isn't it?
It's a pyramid scheme. I know it's a pyramid scheme. And Buddy's gonna like. I know how good he is at talking, and he's gonna try reel me in, and he's going to try and make me come along to this Bali trip, and I'm not going to do it. And I think the only reason that I sort of made that decision is because I was just being stubborn. But then, and then we went for drinks with Buddy, Ella and I, and Buddy told us about what the trip would be. And the more that he was sort of talking about it, the more I was sitting there going, oh, that sounds really cool. That sounds really cool. I think I want to go.
I think I have to go to this.
Damn it. Damn it. She's got me. And I can't imagine what my year would have been like had I not gone to Bali, like in the end, really, after going. But I remember I remember making the decision to go and buying the ticket and being and like watching the money go away. And I was like, all right, well, it's real now.
Yeah,
we're doing it now. And I got this ticket that was this stupid flight that took me into Singapore first and then to Bali because I wanted to save like $50 on a ticket or something, which I will never do again.
Never do again. No.
I'll never do that again. Don't ever just pay the $50 if you're going to go. If you're flying internationally, pay the extra $50 to go on a direct flight because it's not worth a 12-hour layover.
God.
So we get So I have this wild flight over to Bali. And we get there and there's that beautiful sort of moment that happens when you do any kind of like, be it theater or whatever. There's that beautiful moment where everyone's meeting each other and everyone's sort of a bit shy and trying to be really polite and you know, just playing their cards very close to their chest. But that all, I think it was so quick. It was the same kind of experience that I've had working on theater before, where like there's nothing that brings people together faster than doing something like creative together, like working together creatively and being vulnerable and
intense and close
and yeah. And there's something like, you know, that sort of way of being is very much in the culture in Bali as well. It's like it's about sort of being close to each other and vulnerable, and there's a lot more sort of, what I noticed is that there's a lot more trust of other people than what there is in sort of Western society, and that really just sang through in all of the work that we did. And it was just like I look back on Bali now and it really feels like it was a dream. And it's probably because like in the first like 3 or 4 days of the work, we were up until 11 p.m. at night and then waking up at 7 a.m. the next morning.
So you weren't sleeping.
I wasn't really sleeping.
Yeah.
So time became an abstract thing. And I was so every morning when I'd wake up, I'd be like, why am I doing this? Like I need to sleep. But then we'd get down to the theater and we'd start working, and we'd start every day with satsang, which is this sort of, I suppose you'd call it a meditation, like a group meditation, where you're all sort of sitting together and just being with each other and just sort of exploring different feelings that come up together. And every morning I'd always sort of get down to the theater and have the same sort of process where I'd feel really stubborn, and then I get down and be like, oh, this is really nice. This is really lovely. Yeah. And it was like, it just, the whole like I came away from that trip feeling very I'm not quite sure what the word is. With my performance, my art, I just felt a bit more like, I want to say humble, but it's not quite humble. It's just like, it doesn't feel as much of a like I've noticed when I've done, even when I've just been doing self-tapes, when I've been doing, and when I did a fringe show recently as well, where I got to sort of see it too, and even in my writing as well, it feels a bit more effortless, I suppose. Like I'm not thinking so much. I'm not thinking so much. It doesn't feel like, you know, being an artist suddenly doesn't feel like this big, scary sort of, you know, intense thing where you have to be the best or nothing at all. You know, it's just like, you can just sort of do it for the joy of it, and that will often be enough. Like that'll often be when you produce some of your best work, is when you're doing it because you actually really love it. And that's a tricky lesson to learn, I think, for like coming out of drama school and being a young person. It's like, it's hard to learn that, like, just do something because you enjoy it. And you'll be good enough, you'll be good enough to do it.
I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of a Balinese person stressing about making the work. Like there's no stress. I mean, it's not that it's not serious. It's not that it's not important. It's not that it's not deeply felt. But like the idea of stressing about it, or worrying about approval, or it being seen or known or funding it, or all the things that we're all stressing about. So I like that idea. I like that
you can just work. You can work from a place without stress. You don't have to. Yeah. Isn't that nice? Isn't that a nice idea?
Tell me how, Frazer. Tell me how.
Oh man, I wish I knew. We we worked with a fellow called Pak Dibia, who I'm sure has been spoken about on the podcast before. Very incredible man.
Yeah.
And I remember I'd worked with him before Bali, because he had come to VCA and run workshops and things. Yeah, and I remember, ran a Ketchak workshop with us and taught us Balinese dance as well. And it was in this particular Balinese dance class that we were doing. And we were all like, because it just felt so weird in our bodies, those sort of movements and everything, we were all getting like a bit frustrated with it, and just sort of becoming a bit indignant about it and being like, why are we doing this? Like, why this, why that? And then Pak Dibia just said, he stopped the class, and he looked around at us and he said, I've noticed that some of you are getting kind of frustrated with this. And he said, don't do that. And that was all he said. He just said, don't do that. And that stuck with me. Like it'll stay with me for the rest of my life, because I was really like, yeah, don't, I guess don't do that. Just don't be frustrated. It's so good. It's brilliant advice. It's brilliant advice, and I always think about that, and that sort of philosophy was hammered home in Bali as well. Is like, just let it be. You'll be fine. Just let it be.
It's very uncomfortable right now because you're fighting it.
Exactly.
It won't be uncomfortable if you just let it be and let it go and flow with it. It was the thing we said so many times. The word flow, the word let it go, like let it just, it's Bali. Just like saying that again. And like, I remember seeing the frustration on everybody's faces of like, what the fuck are you, what? Like, I need to know, at what time are we leaving? When are we going to eat dinner? Is this, it was just like, I don't know. I just need you to be flexible.
Eventually.
And then by the end, everybody like got it. Everybody was just like in that state of like, oh, well, this is so much easier. This feels so much better. And I actually really want to work from this place.
Totally.
Yeah. So this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you for sharing everything with us.
Thank you.
As we ask you to become a mentor, mentee for other people, like, what advice would you give to those who are thinking about? You've done this twice now. Thinking about it. Oh, maybe I'll submit something. Maybe I've got an idea. I don't know. What would you say to them? Like, besides not fighting it, what advice do you have for our listeners? So
for people who would want to maybe have ideas about producing an audio play with you, is that? Yeah. What advice would I give? I'd say just write the thing. If you have an idea, just write it, and write it entirely for yourself. And and see what happens. I suppose it's
Mm-hmm.
like see what kind of foundation that creates, and be open to letting it change as well. Be open to letting it change and trust that like you couldn't get to, if you create something, you have an original idea, you create that, you get it down on paper, and then it becomes something completely different. Always trust that you couldn't have got to where you did without that first idea.
Yeah,
like there's just no way that you could do that.
Yeah.
Because as artists, like what we said at the start, it's like you're constantly improving on what you did previously, and you're constantly trying to get better. And just trust that you will, and that every idea you have is a foundation for something else.
Yeah. And that if you kill your babies, you can always revive your babies later in another way.
That's right.
Yeah. Maybe it's just not right for this one right now. Like I said, I'm looking forward to hearing what the other version is. I think there's a life there, and so I'm all for it. It's interesting. There's so many ideas that we do reject, not because they're bad, but because they don't fill the brief, or it's just not the right time with everybody else that's there. And so I really encourage everybody who we've said no to keep on anyway, because just because I didn't say yes to it this time doesn't mean I didn't like the idea. It's just that version didn't gel with the topic and didn't gel with the other ones that we're going with. So yeah.
Totally.
All right, Frazer. So time to plug, time to advertise for yourself. Where can we find you? What's coming up for you? What's going on? What do you want the audience to know about you? And what do you want to leave them with?
Awesome. So you can find me on Instagram. That's the best place to check me out. Frazer.Shepherdson. That's as original as I can be with my Instagram handle. I've by the time you hear this episode, it will have already happened, but you can check out A Dance of Ribbons, which is a LARP that I've spent the last year producing. It will have happened a couple of weekends ago, I think, by the time you hear this episode.
Okay, so explain what a LARP is to our non-nerd audience out there.
So Adam and I have been talking a lot about D&D. LARPing is like, so D&D is sitting at a table with your friends pretending to be someone else. LARPing is actually going somewhere, like being outside and pretending to be someone else. So it's like live action, real life D&D where people, they come up with a character that's based in a world that we've created as the team behind it. And they go away for a weekend, they go away camping, and there's 100 people thereabouts, all with unique characters and things. And you all get together and you just have a wild time over the 3 days, and you tell this big, overarching improvised story way out in the bush. So give it a shot. Go give LARPing a go.
So theater.
It honestly is just theater. It's just big improvised theater. Like the more that I swear to God, everything is theater really. Like sport is theater as well, as what I'm learning too. It's like the best improvised physical theater like ever. So yeah, everything is theater. Yes. So check out A Dance of Ribbons, which is the LARP that we've created. You can check them out on Instagram as well. You'll see some stuff about them on my profile too. Also check out a theatre company that some very good friends of mine have founded recently. We put up a fringe show called Fox, which was really well received. It's theatre company's called Three Bags Full, FOOL. We're very excited about. We're going to put some stuff on next year. We do fun comedic plays with a important sort of underlying narrative to them as well. But we're just all about having loads of fun with the audience. So check them out. And what else can I tell you? Oh, I'm writing articles at the moment. You can read those if you want on stagemilk.com. It's an acting website. It's a resource website. They do some really, really cool stuff. If you're an actor, particularly, there's some really great how-to guides and resources for you there. So you can find some of my articles there, and also just other really great stuff too. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's what I've got to plug.
It's fantastic. And obviously, if you're listening to this, you've subscribed to the podcast, you're going to hear coming out soon, Firespeak by Frazer Shepherdson. It's beautiful. It's really lovely to sit back and kind of, I've been camping recently, and I really, it's a great thing to take outside and listen to be outside and do that, not to be surrounded by our technologies and do that. But thank you for coming on. Thank you for submitting again. Thank you for doing all the work, everything. It's been really fantastic to listen to that and to see you, not just through the screen last year, but to see you in Bali and then to see you again now.
Three-dimensional.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Normally, this is where I say, questions and provocations, and you can go to SpeakPipe and leave us 5 stars and all that. You know the spiel, folks. I don't need to go through all of that. Go and listen to Firespeak. If you're listening to this in real time, it'll be out in a couple days. If you're listening to this in the past, it's already there for you. Go and listen to it. Enjoy it. Follow Frazer, and share the love. Frazer, thank you so much for coming back on. It's great to see you, man. And I hope you have a good rest now that it's out of your hands and it's done.
Yeah.
It's one less thing to think about.
One less thing to put in the schedule.
Exactly.
Thanks so much, Adam.
Yeah. Folks, so Firespeak comes out on Monday. We will be following up. Our next interview with Cam Henderson from Barrel House. This is a really exciting play as well. I mean, they're all exciting, but they're so different. It's really interesting. We got so many different genres this year. We have fantasy, we have Western. It's just crazy that this is how it came out. But I'm looking forward to it. So make sure, if you are not already subscribed so you can hear all these interviews and these presentations. And if not, we will see you next time. In the immortal words of Booty, bye! Thanks for joining us this week on the Theater Brothers podcast. Make sure to visit our website, theaterbrothers.org, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. A special thank you to Purple Planet for the music you've heard. The Theater of Others creates a shared community of artists and audiences for the purposes of exploring the most profound issues of our lives and times. We believe the play watches the audience. The audience is necessary, and they are witness to what happens. And you get to be witness to us making that happen. The purpose of this podcast is to open up our process and let you in. We're peeling back the curtain, so to speak, and encouraging you to follow along, to ponder, prod, and question, to join us and criticize us if need be. Being a witness is no passive task and requires much from you. Are you up for the journey? Be sure to tune in next week for our next journey.